So I was born in Jamaica, and I left when I was about 5 years old. My dad left first so that we can have a better life. He came to Brooklyn, New York. So when we moved into that area called East New York, very famous, rough area of Brooklyn, went to a public school, and I was in third grade. And the only thing I remember from attending that public school, PS 273, I was bullied heavily. I don't really remember names, but I remembered my bully. I didn't last a year. Just the sheer terror of what I experienced, and the office always calling my mom to come and pick me up from work was just too devastating. So when I was 7 and still living in the Flatbush area, my dad was always the one that found the babysitters. Well, there was a lady that lived in the building, one floor under us. I just remembered being violated sexually. It just seemed normal to them, and I didn't know anything. I wasn't taught good touch, bad touch, or anything like that. And really, I just don't even know how long it happened. My parents never knew anything. And as the Lord showed me later on in life, I don't even know what was happening to my brother. This was happening to me, but it was always behind closed doors. I carried that through childhood. There were manifestations that came from that, that the Lord showed me. These are the type of things that happen to children who are sexually abused. In my line of work now, I'm a social worker. I can kind of see and I understand so much better what sexual abuse can do to a child when it's not dealt with. So from there, I moved to, the projects. I remember at 16, growing up in the projects, there was drugs everywhere, alcohol, And I remember crack cocaine coming on the scene. And man, did that really make a difference in the neighborhood. Looking back now, God had a plan. Even when I was living in Flatbush, the abuse that I went through, living in the projects, and how I grew and developed. And even while people around me were dying and losing friends, the ambition that I had because of people who were also ambitious living in the projects propelled me forward. I decided to go to Pace University after graduating, and so I was 18. And anytime you go to Jamaica, at least for me, living in my grandmother's home, you always had to go to church. That was just a non-negotiable. My grandmother's pastor was preaching for the youth crusade. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it had to be the altar call. I felt this feeling that I've never felt before, and I started crying. I said, "Well, God, if you want me to come up there, you have to show me yourself. I don't know all these people, and you're asking me to walk down that aisle." And I remember looking up and looking towards my right, and I saw this bright light. It was just something magnificent. And in that bright light, I saw a figure, and I knew it was Jesus. I knew that I had to get up, and I did get up, and I was about to walk forward, and I blinked just so that I could see the light again. And when I looked, I saw my grandmother. I didn't understand it, but I know now that we are to be the light of the world. And it was the light of Jesus shining in her heart. Ever since that, I never turned back. I never backslid. I'm not boasting, but the way Christ presented himself to me, I could do nothing less but live for him. I came back to Brooklyn and I was on fire. I could preach to a tree and expect it to get up and walk. I started to have Bible studies in my crammed room. We lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment that was tiny. And I don't know how these friends of mine who knew nothing about going to church, but they just came. They were drawn, and the little bit that I knew, I gave them. So I was just growing in the Lord, went to every single Bible study there was. And I remember there was a Bible study happening at the church I was going to, and there was a guest teacher. There was some type of attraction, I guess. He commended me about, knowing the word and my enthusiasm. And so a relationship developed. I really didn't know how old he was. The relationship turned abusive quick. Every form of abuse, domestic violence you can think happened. Emotionally, mentally, financially, sexually, every single thing that you could think of happened. And it lasted about 4 years. I thought about killing myself. I just didn't know any way out. I prayed, I cried, I prayed. It was like the Lord was not answering me. And I thought maybe, I remember laying on the sofa. I'm like, Lord, I just need to end this. There's just no way out. And I remember at that moment, I felt this arm wrap around me. It was an encounter with God like never before, unlike, like the testimony I shared about being saved. And I remember falling asleep and just this comfort, this heavenly comfort just enveloped me. And that helped me to move on. How I graduated college, I have no idea because I was in survival mode going into this constant, situation. And I remember the last straw was when he really just a physical encounter that left me bleeding. And I was able to walk away from his apartment and I went straight to the police station. Again, just the power of prayer and just no one to trust but God Almighty. And I could see how he's just kept me through all of these different situations from being bullied, the babysitter, and now this domestic violence relationship. So moved to Florida, and I've got connected to another church, a Baptist church, and it was great. Grew in the Lord and everything, and that's where I met my husband, and we served in ministry diligently. I never deviated from the Lord. It was just this burning desire to just give my life to the Lord after all that he's kept me through, and I was so happy to be in Florida. My husband served as an elder and then became a licensed or ordained pastor. He grew in the Lord and was mentored by Pastor Chris. And so we spent our time here at Bow Down and just ate everything up. And it just showed me that all along, God had a plan, that Jeremiah 29:11 is real. He has a plan for me, not to harm me. Even though all of those adversities, what the devil meant for bad, God meant it for my good. And today I can sit here and actually help the next person. I can encourage the next person because I walked it. I lived the nightmares. And I can tell you that God will bring you out. God is faithful. He said he'll never leave us nor forsake us, even though the enemy will want you to believe that. But he has a plan to prosper you. And I am a prosperous believer.